he said, or else you're going to be digging in the hottest part of the day. He popped some sunflower seeds into his mouth, deftly removed the shells with his teeth, and spat them into Stanley's hole. Every day, Elliot carried the little pig up the mountain and sang to it as it drank from the stream. As the pig grew fatter, Elliot grew stronger. On the day of Myra's 15th birthday, Elliot's pig weighed over 50 stones. Madame Zeroni had told him to carry the pig up the mountain on that day as well. But Elliot didn't want to present himself to Myra smelling like a pig. Instead, he took a bath. It was his second bath in less than a week. Then he led the pig to Myra's. Eagle Buckoff was there with his pig as well. These are two of the fattest pigs I've ever seen, Myra's father declared excitedly. He was also impressed with Elliot, who seemed to have grown bigger and stronger in the last 2 months. I used to think you were a good-for-nothing book reader, he said, but now I see you could be an excellent mud wrestler. May I marry your daughter? Elliot boldly asked. First, I must weigh the pigs. Alas, poor Elliot should have carried the pig up the mountain one last time. The two pigs weighed exactly the same. Stanley's blisters had ripped open, and new blisters had formed on top of them. He kept changing his grip on the shovel to try and avoid the pain. Finally, he removed his cap and held it between the shaft of the shovel and his raw hands. This helped, but digging was harder because the cap would slip and slide. The sun beat down on his unprotected neck and head, though he tried to convince himself otherwise. He'd been aware for a while that his piles of dirt were too close to his hole. The piles were outside his 5-foot circle, but he could see he was going to run out of room. Still, he pretended otherwise and kept adding more dirt to the piles that he would eventually have to move. The problem was that when the dirt was in the ground, it was compacted. It expanded when it was excavated. The piles were a lot bigger than the hole was deep. It was either now or later. Reluctantly, he clambered out through the hole and once again dug his shovel into his previously dug dirt. Myra's father got down onto his hands and knees and closely examined each pig, tail to snout. These are two of the finest pigs I've ever seen, he said at last. How am I to decide? I only have one daughter. Why not let Myra decide? Suggested Elliot Yelnats. That's preposterous, exclaimed Igor, expelling saliva as he spoke. Myra is just an empty-headed girl, said her father. How can she possibly decide when I, her father, can't? She knows how she feels in her heart, said Elliot. Myra's father rubbed his chin. Then he laughed and said, Why not? He slapped Elliot on the back. It doesn't matter to me. A pig's a pig. He summoned his daughter. Elliot blushed when Myra entered the room. Good afternoon, Myra, he said. She looked at him. You're Elliot, right? She said. Myra, said her father. Elliot and Igor have each offered a pig of your hand in marriage. It doesn't matter to me. A pig is a pig. So I will let you make the choice. Whom do you wish to marry? Myra looked confused. You want me to decide? That's right, my blossom, replied her father. Gee, I don't know, said Myra. Which pig weighs more? They both weigh the same, said her father. Gosh, I guess I choose Elliot. No, Igor. No, Elliot. No, Igor. Oh, I know. I'll think of a number between 1 and 10. I'll marry whoever guesses the closest number. Okay, I'm ready. 10, guessed Igor. Elliot said nothing. Elliot, said Myra. What number do you guess? Elliot didn't pick a number. Marry Igor, he muttered. You can keep my pig as a wedding present. The next time the water truck came, it was driven by Mr. Pendansky, who also brought sack lunches. Stanley sat with his back against a pile of dirt and ate. He had a bologna sandwich, potato chips, and a large chocolate chip cookie. How you doing? Said Magnet. Not real good, said Stanley. Well, the first hole's the hardest, Magnet said. Stanley took a long, deep breath. He couldn't afford to dawdle. He was way behind the others and the sun just kept getting hotter. It wasn't even noon yet, but he didn't know if he had the strength to stand up. He thought about quitting. He wondered what they would do to him, what they could do to him. His clothes were soaked with sweat. In school he had learned that sweating was good for you. It was nature's way of keeping you cool. So why was he so hot? You using his shovel for support, he managed to get to his feet. Where were we supposed to go to the bathroom? He asked Magnet. Magnet gestured with his arms to the great expanse around them. Pick a hole, any hole, he said. Stanley staggered across the lake, almost falling over in a dirt pile. Behind him he heard Magnet say, but first make sure nothing's living in it. After leaving Myra's house, Yelnats wandered aimlessly through the town until he found himself by the wharf. He sat on the edge of the pier and stared down into the cold, black water. He could not understand how Myra had trouble deciding between him and Igor. He thought she loved him. Even if she didn't love him, couldn't she see what a foul person Igor was? It was like Madame Zeroni had said. Her head was as empty as a flower pot. Some men were gathered on the dock, and he went to see what was going on. A sign read, "Deckhands wanted, free passage to America." He had no sailing experience, but the ship's captain signed him aboard. The captain could see that Elia was a man of great strength. Not everybody could carry a full-grown pig up the side of a mountain. It wasn't until the ship had cleared the harbour and was heading out across the Atlantic that Elia suddenly remembered his promise to carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain. He felt terrible. He wasn't afraid of the curse. He thought that was a lot of nonsense. He felt bad because he knew Madame Zeroni had wanted to drink from the stream before she died. Zero was the smallest kid in Group D, but he was the first to finish digging. "You're finished?" Stanley asked enviously. Zero said nothing. Stanley walked to Zero's hole and watched him measure it with a shovel. The top of his hole was a perfect circle, and the sides were smooth and deep. Not one dirt clod more than necessary had been removed from the earth. Zero pulled himself up to the surface. He didn't even smile. He looked down at his perfectly dug hole, spat in it, then turned and headed back to camp compound. "Zero's one weird dude," said Zigzag. Stanley would have laughed, but he didn't have the strength. Zigzag had to be the weirdest dude Stanley had ever seen. He had a long skinny neck and a big round head with wild frizzy blonde hair that stuck out in all directions. His head seemed to bob up and down on his neck, like it was on a spring. Armpit was the second one to finish digging. He also spat in his hole before heading back to camp compound. One by one, Stanley watched each of the boys spit in their hole and returned to the camp compound. Stanley kept digging. His hole was almost up to his shoulders, although it was hard to tell exactly where the ground level was because his dirt piles completely surrounded the hole. The deeper he got, the harder it was to raise the dirt up and out of the hole. Once again he realised he was going to have to move the piles. His cap was stained with blood from his hands. He felt like he was digging his own grave. In America, Elliot learned to speak English. He fell in love with a woman named Sarah Miller. She could push a plough, milk a goat, and most importantly, think for herself. She and Elliot often stayed up half the night talking and laughing together. Their life was not easy. Elliot worked hard, but bad luck seemed to follow them everywhere. He was always seeming to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He remembered Madame Zeroni telling him that she had a son in America. Elliot was forever looking for him. He'd walk up to complete strangers and ask if they knew somebody called Zeroni, or had ever heard anyone named Zeroni. No one did. Elliot was sure what he had to do if he'd ever find Madame Zeroni's son anyway. Carry him up the mountain and sing that big lullaby to him. But after his barn was struck by lightning for the third time, he told Sarah about his broken promise to Madame Zeroni. "I'm worse than a pig thief," he said. "You should leave me and find someone that isn't cursed." "I'm not leaving you," replied Sarah, "but I want you to do one thing for me." "Anything," said Elliot. Sarah smiled. "Sing me the pig lullaby." Okay guys, I'm going to finish there because I've only got about 20 seconds until video runs out, so I will pick up again